Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ever look at a square and think, there's got to be more to you than just four sides?
You'd be surprised.
Well, get ready to unlock the hidden world of quadrilaterals. Because today's deep dive, all about those four-sided shapes and the fascinating stuff most people don't realize about them.
And you're right, there's a surprising amount of complexity beneath those simple shapes. We'll be exploring some pretty amazing properties and relationships, things that might have you looking at geometry in a whole new light.
And we often take geometry for granted, but can visit it's everywhere. City layouts, furniture design, you name it. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with the basics.
Sound good to me.
Okay, so we're talking polygons today, specifically those with four sides, our quadrilateral friends.
Right, and our sources for this geometric adventure. We've got some classic geometry textbook excerpts. Always a great place to start, along with some hands-on activities.
Oh, fun.
You might even want to grab a pencil and paper to follow along.
Okay, so polygons basically shapes with three or more straight sides, right?
Exactly.
Triangles are old pal with three sides. Quadrilateral rocking four, pentagon strutting five. You get the idea.
Right.
Today's all about quadrilaterals, but there's a whole family tree within those four sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to understand those different quadrilaterals, we need to talk about diagonals.
Diagonals.
Yeah. A diagonal is just a line segment that connects two non-adjacent vertices or corners of a polygon.
Right. They're like secret pathways inside a shape, kind of revealing hidden connections and properties. And diagonals, way cooler than back in math class. The Eiffel Tower, for example, that intricate structure, that iconic lattice design.
Oh, I see where you're going with that.
It all comes down to diagonals, those crisscrossing beams. Not just for looks, they provide incredible strength, stability, all thanks to, you guessed it, geometry.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And those diagonals also help us tell the difference between convex and concave polygons.
Convex concave rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
Sure. Imagine shining a light on a shape. If the light reaches every corner without any blockage, that's convex. Most everyday shapes, like a soccer ball or a stop sign, are convex.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
But then those shapes where the light gets a little lost, create some shadows, those are concave. Like think about a star.
Ah, with those points sticking out.
Exactly. Those points create little pockets of shadow. In geometry terms, a concave polygon has at least one diagonal that falls outside of the shape itself.
Gotcha. So we've got our diagonals, our well-lit convex shapes, and our shadowy concave figures. But for today's deep dive, we're sticking with the well-lit world of convex quadrilaterals.
Good choice.
And you know what's so cool about these four-sided wonders? No matter what crazy shape you make, the angles inside always add up to, wait for it, 360 degrees.
It's true. A fundamental truth about quadrilaterals.
Yeah.
Might seem a bit strange at first, but our trusty sources give us not one, but two awesome ways to actually visualize this.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So, the first way involves a little geometric surgery.
Okay.
We're going to dissect the quadrilateral. Just picture it. You draw a diagonal, any diagonal, slicing your quadrilateral into two triangles.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now, remember way back to triangle basics. The angles inside a triangle always add up to 180 degrees.
Right.
Two triangles, 180 degrees each, boom. 360 degrees.
That's neat. I've always been a fan of visual proofs. What's the second way?
Okay, for this one, imagine you're a tile installer, but instead of boring old squares, you're working with identical quadrilaterals.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Arrange those quadrilaterals around a single point. Fit them together like a puzzle. What happens?
Their angles mesh perfectly, right?
Exactly. They form a complete circle, a full 360-degree rotation. And just like that, you've demonstrated this fundamental quadrilateral property.
Okay, mind officially blown. Those shapes are sneakier than they look. Speaking of sneaky, our sources also mention exterior angles.
Ah, yes, exterior angles add a whole new dimension to understanding polygons.
Okay, walk me through it.
So picture extending one side of a polygon, like stretching out an arm of a starfish.
All right, I'm with you.
The angle formed between that extended side and the adjacent side, that, my friend, is your exterior angle.
So it's like peeking around the corner of a shape.
Exactly. And here's the really wild part. No matter how many sides your polygon has, a triangle or some crazy shape with more sides than we can count, the sum of all its exterior angles is always 360 degrees.
Seriously, that seems off. A triangle, maybe I can picture that, but some massive polygon. That's got to be a bigger number.
It's true. It all goes back to that full rotation idea. Imagine walking around a building, any building. Each time you turn a corner, you're basically turning through an exterior angle, right?
Ah, yeah.
And to get back to your starting point, facing the same way you started, you'll have made a complete 360-degree turn.
Wow, that's a really cool way to think about it. It's like geometry is hiding in plain sight. And speaking of things we see all the time, let's dive into the quadrilateral family tree, see what makes each type special. Let's start with a shape that's probably more common than people realize, the trapezium.
Oh, a good one to start with.
Picture this. You're drawing two perfectly parallel lines. Then you just slice through them at an angle with another line. Boom, trapezium.
Perfect visual. Formally, a trapezium is just a quadrilateral with at least one pair of parallel sides. Simple as that.
Elegant, really. What about those trapeziums with a little flair? Bit of symmetry to them.
Ah, you're talking about the isosceles trapezium. Now, this member of the family likes to keep things interesting by having its two non-parallel sides equal in length.
Fancy. It's like the trapezium decided to dress up a little.
Okay, speaking of stylish shapes, kites.
Ah, yes, the kite. A quadrilateral that truly lives up to its name. Just like a kite soaring through the air, the geometric kite has those two pairs of adjacent sides that are equal in length. And you know what's cool? You can make a perfect kite shape with a simple piece of paper, a couple of folds, and two strategic cuts.
No way. Gotta try that. I've always loved how hands-on geometry can be. But back to the kite. I remember something about the way its diagonals intersect. There's something special about it, right? You remember correctly. The diagonals of a kite always intersect at a perfect right angle. And this little property, it's actually super important in design and engineering.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
Well, think about designing a bridge. You need something strong, right? Something that can handle the weight. The kite shape, with those perpendicular diagonals, it's incredibly strong and stable, like those bowstring arches. They often use those kite geometry principles to distribute weight evenly, resist all those forces.
So the kite's not just a pretty shape then, it's like a structural superhero. Geometry's like the secret code behind so much. And speaking of hidden codes, let's talk about a quadrilateral that's practically royalty in the geometry world, the mighty parallelogram.
Ah, the parallelogram. Okay, picture this at two strips of paper. One's laid down straight, the other's slanted across it, but they're still perfectly parallel. That's your parallelogram.
Okay, I can see it.
Formally speaking, it's all about those opposite sides. Two pairs of them, each pair running parallel. Like perfectly aligned train tracks going on forever.
Sounds kind of simple, but something tells me there's more to it. What's the parallelogram hiding?
You're catching on. Those parallel sides, they unlock a bunch of interesting stuff. First off, opposite sides of a parallelogram aren't just parallel, they're equal in length too.
No way.
Oh yeah, and get this, opposite angles are equal too. It's all about balance with this shape.
Symmetry and parallel lines, what's not to love? But what about our diagonals? What happens in a parallelogram?
Ah, good question. The diagonals in a parallelogram, they bisect each other perfectly, meet right in the middle, split each other into two equal segments.
It's like a perfectly balanced handshake.
Exactly.
It's amazing how those parallel sides lead to so many cool things. But get ready, because the parallelogram's about to get a serious upgrade. Introducing the rhombus.
The rhombus. Think of it like a super kite.
Yeah.
Or a parallelogram that's been hitting the gym, it's got those equal adjacent sides like a kite, but all four sides of a rhombus are equal. It's all about that perfect balance, perfect symmetry.
The rhombus took the parallelogram's parallel sides and said, I can top that. But what does this mean? What new superpowers does the rhombus have?
That one tweak, all sides equal, changes the game. Its diagonals don't just bisect each other, they do it at perfect right angles.
Whoa.
We call them perpendicular bisectors. Imagine those diagonals meeting right in the center, splitting each other in half and forming a perfect right angle. It's beautiful.
This super kite is definitely living up to its name. And speaking of amazing things, let's talk about a shape that's as practical as it is fascinating, the rectangle.
Ah, the rectangle.
Yeah.
So practical. The rectangle takes those parallel sides from the parallelogram, but then it's all about precision, four perfect right angles. Those 90-degree wonders are everywhere.
Seriously, they are everywhere. Walls, doors, windows. The rectangle is like the unsung hero of design and architecture. But what about those diagonals in a rectangle? Anything special going on there?
Oh, absolutely. Remember how the parallelogram's diagonals bisect each other? Well, the rectangle takes it a step further. Its diagonals aren't just bisectors, they're also equal in length. And you know what's really cool? We can actually prove this using triangles. It shows how all these geometric ideas connect.
Geometry is like a giant puzzle. Each shape is a piece that fits perfectly. And speaking of perfect fits, our quadrilateral quest has brought us to the ultimate overachiever, the one and only, The square.
The square is like the culmination of everything we've been talking about. It's a
Yeah.
rectangle, but with equal sides. So it's got those fantastic right angles, the equal diagonals, all of that. But because it has equal sides, it's technically a rhombus, too.
The shape does it all. So what does this mean for the square? What can it do with all those combined powers? It really is. The square is like that friend who's amazing at everything: school, sports, music, you name it. They've got those parallel sides, equal sides, the right angles, those bisecting diagonals, and those diagonals are equal in length too. It's like, what can't the square do?
I know, right? It's the ultimate overachiever. But what I find so cool is how all of this shows how interconnected geometry is. It's not just random shapes. It's like a family tree. Each quadrilateral linked together by shared properties, these ancestral connections.
Totally. We started with the trapezium, our base quadrilateral, then we had the kite with its equal adjacent sides, the parallelogram with the parallel lines, and then those led to even more specialized shapes, the rhombus and rectangle, with the square, of course, at the top.
It's like geometric evolution. Each shape adding its own unique spin to the quadrilateral lineage.
Exactly. And it makes you realize understanding these basic shapes helps you understand way more complex stuff later on. It's like the alphabet of geometry. Learn the letters, then you can make words, sentences, whole stories.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
But it's one thing to understand it all on paper. What about real-world applications? I mean, we see rectangles everywhere, buildings, phones, you name it. But do those geometric properties actually matter outside of a textbook?
Absolutely. Think about architecture. A parallelogram's parallel side seems simple, but they're crucial for stability, right? In buildings, bridges those parallel lines make sure forces are distributed evenly, prevent things from bending or collapsing.
Makes sense, like a house of cards that all relies on those perfect edges. But what about the other shapes? Those unique diagonals we talked about, those must have some real-world uses too.
Of course. That right angle in a kite's diagonals. Super useful in design. Think about kite frames themselves. Those perpendicular diagonals are what make them strong, stable, able to fly, and those retractable roofs on stadiums. Same principle. Even simple things like tiling a floor, using quadrilateral properties to make patterns, cover a surface without any gaps.
Wow, I'm seeing geometry everywhere now. So to wrap things up, we started with polygons, dove into the world of quadrilaterals, explored their hidden connections, and uncovered how these geometry rules are everywhere around us, from skyscrapers to kites flying in the sky.
It's amazing how much there is to these shapes, right? More than meets the eye.
Definitely. It reminds us that there's always something new to learn, to explore, even in the things we see every single day. So to all our listeners, next time you see a square, a rectangle, even a trapezium, take a second. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Until next time, stay curious. The world's full of fascinating shapes just waiting to be explored.